Facing our nation and the Lowcountry, addressed tonight. Prices on the rise, with consumers facing the brunt of stubborn inflation. The fallout of an historic Supreme Court ruling on abortion. And the crisis at the southern border. Tonight, two candidates hoping to take elected office for the first time. Mac Deford, an attorney and U.S. Coast Guard veteran, and Michael B. Moore, a business executive, will meet face to face. With just days to go until voters decide who gets the Democratic nomination, tonight, you choose who gets your vote. Live from the News 2 studio in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, this is the 1st Congressional District Democratic Primary Debate.
Good evening and welcome. I am your host, Brendan Clark, and yes, we are less than a week away from South Carolina's 1st Congressional District primary race on Tuesday, June 11th. Voters making their final decisions on which candidates they would like to see on the November ballot, the seat currently held by Republican incumbent Nancy Mace. Over the next 60 minutes, you will hear from Democratic candidates Mac Deford and Michael B. Moore. Tonight, we are broadcasting to viewers across South Carolina's Lowcountry. Voters in Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties are joining us on WCBD News 2. Beaufort, Bluffton, and Hilton Head voters are watching this debate on WSAV. For those of you who are following along at home, feel free to use the hashtag SC-01 debate. But before we get started with tonight's topics, first, the rules. Mr. Deford, Mr. Moore, you'll have 60 seconds to answer each question. If there is a follow-up question or rebuttal, you'll have 30 seconds. And when your time is up, you will hear this sound. Each candidate will also have 60 seconds for a closing statement. So, with that being said, it is time to begin the 1st Congressional District Democratic Debate with tonight's moderators, WCBD's Carolyn Murray and WSAV's Ben Sanger. Carolyn, Ben, the floor is yours.
Brendan, thank you. Good evening, candidates, and welcome to our audience watching at home, on air, and online.
A card draw determined who will go first. So, Mr. Michael B. Moore, the first question is for you tonight, and we are going to begin with the economy. So we polled News 2 viewers last week, and they said that inflation is one of the biggest issues facing the 1st Congressional District. Everyday South Carolinians are struggling to provide basic needs for their families. So, Mr. Moore, what is one idea you would champion to bring relief to Lowcountry consumers? Be specific. You have 60 seconds.
Well, first, thanks for this wonderful event. It's great to have an opportunity to share on such a broad platform. Look, my background's in business. I talk about the economy and the need that we need to create a more inclusive economy every time I'm out. People are struggling. There may be some macroeconomic indicators that are positive, but on whole, people are struggling with various costs, the cost of housing, the cost of child care, the cost of medical care. So I think, look, one thing that I have talked long about is just first we need a little bit of honesty on this. I think a lot of the inflation that we're experiencing is companies basically taking advantage of the situation to raise their prices and to maximize their profits. And I think we need to have a little bit more of a rational approach to things. I can talk more about this going forward, but I think it's a partnership between business and between government to have a much fairer approach to this.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, what is one idea you would champion to bring relief to Lowcountry consumers? Be specific. You have 60 seconds.
Absolutely. So, I think that we have made a lot of good strides. I mean, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. President Biden came into office and saw us out of that pandemic. We've had monumental legislation passed under the Biden administration, in particular the Inflation Reduction Act, and I still think we're going to see a lot of the benefits from that law that are going to come to fruition. But we also have to address local issues here to make sure that the pressures of financial constraints are not overburdening families. One of the things, I have a lot of background in local government. I was an attorney for the 4th largest municipality here in South Carolina and general counsel for a municipality in Beaufort County. And I think housing is one of the most critical issues locally here, and being able to bring affordable housing projects to the Lowcountry to help families.
And a follow-up for you, Mr. Deford, how would you like to pay for what you would like to do? You have 30 seconds.
Absolutely. I think that there's already a lot of money there. This could be reallocation of funds within the, and not just the Inflation Reduction Act, but also the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Housing is infrastructure. And we also have to think outside of silos. Housing is more than just providing a roof over one's head. It's also health care, because we know that having access to quality housing has a direct impact on people's health outcomes.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, how will you pay for it in 30 seconds?
Well, look, I think a lot of what I am proposing, what I initially proposed in terms of looking at how companies, corporate America, and how governments can look to push a lot of this price gouging down, there really isn't a cost involved, but there are all kinds of things. I also believe it's really important to look at the income side, the salary side. I think costs are going up, but we also need to fight to ensure that working families have a living wage, and that they're able to track with the various increases in expenses.
Thank you. That's your time. We're going to stay with the economy, but move on here. So data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that in September of 2023, the average weekly wage in South Carolina was $1,086. According to MIT, a single person with one child working full-time would need to earn about $1,400 a week to live comfortably in this state. So, Mr. Moore, you have said that you want to create an economy that works for everyone. So how will you work as a member of Congress to do that? You have 60 seconds.
Well, look, I think part of what is at the core of what we're doing is I think, despite what many in this state believe, I think labor unions can be a very important piece of the puzzle. We take for granted so many of the gains that have come from labor unions. Look, they're out to fight for the interests of working families, and if management and shareholders have the right to bargain and to collectively, sort of advance their issues, why shouldn't working families? We've gotten the support, the endorsement of a number of important labor unions, the longshoremen here, the ILA, largest and most influential union, endorsed us. The government workers, just last week, 750,000 government workers endorsed us, because we're out fighting for working families and trying to figure out ways to not only help them to earn, sort of decent wages, good wages to take care of their families, but also holding down costs from companies.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, we're going to dig deeper on something that you mentioned earlier. The 1st Congressional District is facing a serious affordable housing shortage, in part due to a decades-long period of underbuilding and rising home prices. So in Beaufort and Charleston counties, there are strategies underway to create more workforce housing, as rising costs have made it more difficult for people to live where they work, even before the recent wave of inflation and the pandemic. So what is your plan to give people more options for affordable housing? You have 60 seconds.
Absolutely. I think that you have to attack the problem in twofold, and I have experience doing this on the local level. First, we have to provide housing options, not just for rent, but also for home ownership. And we have local housing trusts that have been established. If you're down in Beaufort County, there is the Beaufort-Jasper County Housing Trust. These trusts can really facilitate the ability, if they are properly funded, for, say, first-time home buyers to draw money from that trust for a down payment. But I also think that we need to be funding grant fund programs so that our municipalities, our counties, and nonprofit organizations can acquire land and also build workforce housing, multifamily housing projects, so that our workforce can live where they work.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Candidates, we are moving to the topic of abortion. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court 2 years ago, many elected leaders, including former President Donald Trump, have argued abortion access is a state issue. Mr. Deford, do you believe that decisions regarding reproductive rights should be left up to states, or should the federal government play a role? Please answer yes or no first, and then explain your answer. You have 1 minute.
No, the issue of abortion is not a states' rights issue in my judgment. We have to do everything that we can as a nation to protect a woman's right to choose. I know firsthand what happens when these draconian laws from the 60s and the 50s come back. My maternal grandmother was 31 years old in 1960. She was the mother of 8 children. She was the bridge of an iron worker. And when she became pregnant with her 9th, her husband fell and could no longer work. She ended up getting a backroom abortion, and on February 5th of 1960, she lost her life. 8 young children lost their mother. A husband lost his wife. And that sent my mother, who was 5.5 years old at the time, into a broken foster care system. So when I say that the first thing that the 119th Congress, when it is sworn in January of next year, is introduce legislation to codify women's reproductive rights, people at home know that you can take that to the bank.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Moore. The same question to you. Do you believe that decisions regarding reproductive rights should be left up to states, or should the federal government play a role? Please answer yes or no first, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
No, I similarly believe that we've got to codify Roe. Look, there were 60,000 pregnancies, forced pregnancies in the states that outlawed abortion with girls and women who were raped or who suffered from incest. That's just unconscionable in the United States of America. We need to give women back the freedom to make decisions about their own body. I just fundamentally believe that government has no role in the doctor's office and getting in between women and their physicians, and I think it wholly appropriate that at the federal level that we enact legislation to protect that right.
A follow-up question for you, Mr. Moore, and you will have 30 seconds to respond. It isn't lost on anyone that both of you standing here are men. So the issue of abortion is not something, it's not a decision that you actually would ever have to make for yourself. So should voters decide this issue on the ballot? Please answer yes or no, and you will have 30 seconds to explain your answer.
No, I mean, I think representatives in Washington, I think the most effective way to do it is at the national level. I don't see a national codicil on abortion happening. I think representatives in Washington can reestablish Roe, the laws that are there to protect women in this way.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, the same question to you. Should voters have the opportunity to decide on abortion limits? Should that be on the ballot? Please answer yes or no, and you will have 30 seconds to explain your answer.
No. I do believe that voters, they send their representatives to Congress, and I believe that when we flip the House in January, that we're going to have the numbers to introduce legislation to provide a national protection for women. At the end of the day, this is about individual dignity, the dignity of a woman to dictate her own pathway to motherhood and when and if she's going to become a mother. And it is very dangerous, as I just mentioned, when the government intrudes upon a woman's decision and harms women that way.
Thank you for your response. Ben.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to health care now. Where you live can have a direct impact on the health care that you receive. In some parts of the 1st Congressional District, people have to travel upwards of 25 miles to reach the nearest hospital. So, Mr. Deford, in your opinion, what are the biggest barriers to health care access in the district, and what will you do about them? You have 60 seconds.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It is no question that we have certain communities here in the 1st Congressional District that do not have access to healthcare facilities and that lack access to affordable healthcare. The first thing that we can do is South Carolina can expand Medicaid, because over 350,000 South Carolinians are not covered who otherwise would be qualified under Medicaid. So we can start by that. We also need to invest in infrastructure for healthcare facilities. We do have a shortage of healthcare facilities in certain parts of this district, not just in rural areas, but also down in Hilton Head, where they only have one hospital on their island. I would say, too, lowering healthcare costs for folks. One of the reasons why healthcare costs, prescription medications are so expensive, for example, pharmacy benefit managers who are supposed to negotiate the prices of prescription medications and pass that savings on to the consumer. But the problem is that they're owned by the insurance companies, and they need further higher level of regulation and oversight.
Thank you. Now, according to the most recent estimates from the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office, more than 120,000 people in the Low Country are uninsured. So medical debt has become a leading cause of personal bankruptcy all across the U.S. So, Mr. Moore, you've said that this is because the current healthcare system prioritizes profits over people. So what are two ways that we can make healthcare more affordable for people in the district? You have 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. There are 110 million Americans who are struggling with some degree of medical debt. It's the #1 cause of bankruptcy in this nation. And we're the only major industrialized nation that seeks to maximize profit on injury and illness in this way. So it's a fundamental approach problem, I think. Look, I think there's a couple things we can do. The United States government is the single largest purchaser of drugs in the country, and I think, like President Biden did with putting a $35 a month cap on insulin, I think we can use that negotiating leverage to lower prices. And as mentioned, I really do think, even though it's a local issue, the issue of Medicaid expansion is such a critical one. 20,000 South Carolinians are no longer with us because we didn't choose to opt into that program. If Mississippi, which originally opted out, can sort of unanimously come back in, I think I've got hope for South Carolina as well.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Thank you. Candidates, infrastructure and resiliency are two things we often hear here together. Most people want more development to meet the growing demand for housing and the economy, but they want new construction designed in a way that protects the natural resources of the Low Country. Mr. Moore, how do you strike a balance between needing more infrastructure and doing so in a way that promotes resiliency? You have 1 minute to explain your answer.
Well, look, they don't call us the Low Country for no reason. We are not only low, but we are getting lower. There was an article in the New York Times last month that talked about, because the groundwater is getting sucked out, that we're actually getting even lower. This is an existential issue. I've got 4 sons. I've got an amazing 10-month-old granddaughter, and I really care about the world that our generations are leaving theirs. There's research that says that by the year 2100, 8 million people are going to need to be relocated from the coastlines. We got to care about this. So I think the first thing is just all of us as Americans have to adopt almost as a part of our culture, just a more fervent, stronger view and just way of thinking about protecting the environment. There are so many structural things, tactical things that we can do, but the first thing is we've got to care about this issue, and certainly Nancy Mace and others on the extreme right, you won't ever hear them talking about this. So this is an important issue for the Low Country in particular. We've got as much skin in the game on this issue as anyone.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, the same question to you. How do you strike a balance between needing more infrastructure and doing so in a way that promotes resiliency? You have 60 seconds to explain your answer.
Well, thank you for the question. And I'm the only candidate in this race that really has actual on-the-ground experience working on infrastructure projects, where I've advised local governments on road and bridge projects and other infrastructure projects. I think that first and foremost, you have to be able to work with your local and state governments, collaboration with your other governments, and also community leaders to ensure that we're hearing from everyone is significantly important. But I also think that we have to, when we look at, for example, flood mitigation infrastructure. There is built mechanical flood mitigation infrastructure that can be deployed, but there are also natural barriers that protect us, such as protecting our marshes, making sure that they're healthy, because that really helps with flood mitigation. And also beach renourishment projects, all things that I have a lot of experience with.
Thank you for your response. Historic St. Helena Island, which is the epicenter of Gullah Geechee culture, has been in the headlines repeatedly over the past year. And this is in part due to the ongoing efforts to preserve the Cultural Protection Overlay District. Now, Mr. Deford, how would you support improving and maintaining the quality of life for Gullah Geechee communities? And you have 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you for the question. With regard to the specific issues surrounding St. Helena Island, there is a proposed development, Pine Island, that from what I've heard from members of the community, they are very against it. It would cause a lot of strain on the local infrastructure, which is just inadequate. And it would totally change the character and makeup of historic St. Helena, where there are many historic landmarks there and historic communities. How to help the Gullah Geechee community? One of the things that I did serving in local government was I helped advocate for the creation of the Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation. And that is an important CDC that promotes entrepreneurship within the Gullah Geechee community, but also provides money, funding for heirs property disputes, which is a huge issue here in the Low Country and all throughout the South. So there are a lot of other things that we can do, but we do have to start by supporting our local communities and making sure that they have the infrastructure that they need as well.
Mr. Moore, you have described the climate crisis and rising sea level threat as an existential issue. In fact, you just said that a couple of minutes ago. You say that it will require a combination of federal intervention, money, as well as cultural changes to resolve. Can you give us specific examples of what you mean by this? And you have 60 seconds to do so.
Yeah, I just mean that, look, the power of the oil and gas industry, for example, is extraordinary. They are now at a point where they are earning some of the greatest profits in the history of capitalism, and effectively they're doing so while contributing to this enormous problem that we have. I just believe that when I talk about the culturally, we all have to embrace the notion that our survival in many ways literally rests on us all as Americans pulling together and getting behind this issue. NOAA just, I think last week, came out and said that there's an 85% probability that this hurricane season will be among the most dangerous and the most violent in history. We got to care about this. I mentioned the research that says that millions of people are going to need to be removed from the coastlines. It's not going to take just negotiating and dealing with lobbyists and the like. It's going to take all Americans binding together to act as a counterbalance against these threats that exist to the environment.
Candidates, thank you. Ben?
Thank you. We're going to talk about the border now. The crisis at the southern border has long been at the center of congressional gridlock. Despite South Carolina being more than 1,000 miles away from the border, recent News 2 polls show that immigration and border security are top of mind for voters in the 1st Congressional District. So, Mr. Moore, is enough being done right now to secure the southern border? You have 60 seconds.
No, I think look, there was a bipartisan deal on the table, bill that was a conservative bill that would have done the most in history to try to protect the southern border, and Republicans, extreme Republicans, Nancy Mace, Donald Trump, and others, nixed that deal. I'm pleased that President Biden sort of grabbed the bull by the horns and issued an executive order to try to create some sense out of the situation down there. But it's a big problem, and I will say it's a hemispheric problem. If we just start worrying about the problem when people arrive at our border, we've lost. We need to think about this hemispheric problem in a hemispheric way and negotiating with our southern partners to create political stability, economic stability, so people aren't coming.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, same question to you. Is enough being done right now to secure the southern border? You have 60 seconds.
No, and this is a problem that Congress needs to fix. This has been an issue that has been kicked back and forth for way too long. And at the end of the day, we need to make sure that our officials down at the border are receiving the support and the resources that they need to secure the border. But at the same time, we have to get away from what we're hearing on the other side of the aisle, that they want to shut the border down and build a wall. The image of America is not a giant wall. It is the Statue of Liberty. And so we can have a secure border while paving the way for efficient, fair immigration into this country to allow people who want to come and contribute to America to be here. But we also have to look at why people are leaving. Why in such mass troves are people leaving? And they're not leaving their homes because things are great at home. So I think that the international community, especially the United States, should start looking into more ways that we can invest in economies in Mexico and South America that would ultimately benefit the United States as well.
Thank you. We do have a follow-up on this issue as well. Mr. Mr. Deford, is part of the problem an inability of lawmakers to work together across party lines? You have 30 seconds for this response.
I think that if you really boil it down, they all probably agree on some of the basic concepts of border security. The problem is that when it comes time to actually put it to a vote, we saw what happened earlier this year where Nancy Mace and others just totally blew it up because Donald Trump didn't want to give Joe Biden a win in a presidential year. So I think that there is more consensus on this issue than not, but they're putting politics over people.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, is part of the problem an inability of lawmakers to work together across party lines in this issue? You have 30 seconds.
I think so. I don't think there's much honesty on this issue at all. Look, when I hear former President Trump and others on that extreme MAGA end of the spectrum maligning the people coming into this country, calling them rapists and people from mental institutions, look, the facts belie all that. The facts reject all that. People who come over into the United States, immigrants, are statistically far less inclined to commit crimes or to do things for obvious kinds of reasons. We need to get honest about this issue.
Thank you. Caroline.
Thank you. Moving now to the issue of foreign policy. Earlier this year, Congress passed a $95 billion foreign aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, a move that received widespread criticism from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. By a show of hands, would you have voted for this package if you were a member of the U.S. House of Representatives? Thank you. Mr. Moore, please explain your position. Do you believe the U.S. should continue giving billions of dollars in foreign aid and ammunitions to countries in need? You have 60 seconds to explain your position.
Yeah, look, if we allow Putin to have his way in Ukraine, where's he going to stop? Is he going to walk into Poland and then all of a sudden there's a NATO issue and American troops are committed to being in Europe? Nobody wants that. I think, first of all, we need to stop Putin. We need to stop his aggression. We need to secure or allow Zelensky to secure his sense of national security, because I think that's in the best interest of world security as well as in national security.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, you also raised your hand when asked about this, and so the question is, do you believe the United States should continue giving billions of dollars in foreign aid and ammunitions to countries in need? Please explain your position. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for the question. I absolutely would support foreign aid to our allies. And I think that the other folks on the other side of the aisle need to understand that this is about collective security. And if we are failing to support Ukraine, we have spent a very nominal percentage of our defense budget, about 3% of our defense budget, and Ukraine has not fallen. And in fact, they've been able to engage in offensive operations against Russia. We cannot allow Putin to encroach upon, one, a democratic nation, but also, two, our NATO allies, because if they attack a NATO ally, the United States is at war. And as it pertains to Taiwan, China is not a friend of the United States either. They are an adversary. And if China is definitely looking at what's going on in Ukraine, I guarantee you they are thinking twice about going and attacking Taiwan, because they know that with the United States back and support that they would fail.
Appreciate your responses. Ben?
All right, thank you. We are going to move on to redistricting now. 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld 1st Congressional District's lines in a ruling of 6-3, a decision that the Republican-controlled state legislature did nothing wrong when it moved 30,000 black residents out of the 1st District and into the 6th. Strategists and experts have called SC-01 one of the last true battleground districts in the state. So, Mr. Deford, given this ruling, do you think it will be harder for a Democrat to win this seat now? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, well, first and foremost, thank you for the question. When Joe Cunningham flipped this district in 2018, it was rated R+10. It's rated R+7 today. This district is also the only congressional district in South Carolina that rejected Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary. And support for Nancy Mace has been waning considerably. I am running to be a U.S. congressman for all people of the Low Country. I happen to be a Democrat, but I am running to represent all people, whether they are Republican, Independent, or Democrat. And I'm proud that we have been able to garner a lot of bipartisan support, not just from Democrats. We have a strong Democratic base of support, but also from Independents and Republicans, including former Nancy Mace donors. So I feel very confident that we will flip this seat in November.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, same question to you. Given the ruling, do you think it will be harder for a Democrat to win this seat now? You have 60 seconds.
Well, I think just as a math problem, yes, it will be harder. I know our team, when we decided to jump in the race, we looked at the lines as they're drawn now, and so we feel really confident about our plan to flip the district. But I think, look, either we're a nation that agrees and that continues to support democratic principles like one person, one vote, or we're not. You know, when 30,000 people effectively lose their political voice, people just like me, African Americans in the 1st Congressional District, I think it's a big issue, and it's very disappointing. And you know, again, I engage with this issue also personally. My great-great-grandfather, Robert Smalls, was redistricted from the 5th Congressional District to the 7th Congressional District because the state wanted to concentrate African American and progressive political power in one political district. Sound familiar? So, you know, 140 some years later, but we're dealing with the same issues, and you know, it makes it more difficult for us to win. But we're building the kind of coalition in the Democrat base as well as with Independents and moderate Republicans.
That's your time. Thank you. But we're going to ask you this now, Mr. Moore. If you win the Democratic nomination, what is your path to victory in SC-01 come November? You have 60 seconds.
Well, the path to victory is we are pulling together the broadest and deepest coalition of voters on the Democrat side, certainly voters of color, many of whom have not felt like someone has reached out and tried to earn their support. We have been all throughout the settlement communities, the African American settlement communities. We've been engaged with the Gullah Geechee community, from which I am descended. We're even engaging with the Latino community down in Beaufort County. Y el hecho que yo puedo hablar español un poquito, the fact that I can speak a little bit of Spanish is really helpful in that effort. We're pulling together women, we're pulling together young people, and then of course, as the business guy in the race, we're also pulling together Independents and moderate Republicans in large numbers as well.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, if you win the Democratic nomination, what is your path to victory at SC-01 come November? You have 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question. So I jumped into this race early. I jumped in over a year ago. And so I knew that I was going to have to lay a lot of groundwork. And the first thing that I wanted to do when I started running was identify the communities that don't get visited by candidates. And I started going to those communities and going more than once to make sure that I'm understanding their concerns and their needs. So we've built a lot of connections with folks who in communities where they have low voter turnout, because when you go to some of these communities and you find out they have an issue with their drinking water, it's no surprise, because it doesn't matter if there's an R or a D next to their congressional representative's name. So we're making a very intentional effort there. And as I mentioned before, to win this district, you absolutely need bipartisan support. And I am the candidate on the Democratic side that has been getting broad-based bipartisan support from Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, and we're also energizing the younger generations. Despite my gray hair, I'm only 35. In fact, we just got an endorsement from College Democrats of South Carolina today.
Thank you. Caroline.
Thank you. Candidates, you both described the presumptive Republican nominee, Representative Nancy Mace, as too chaotic for Washington. You referred to her just a few minutes ago, Mr. Moore, as extreme, and said that she's not focused on the low country. But a recent Emerson College Next Star poll shows that Nancy Mace is still the favored candidate among likely Republican primary voters. Mr. Deford, what are the 3 biggest issues Representative Mace has failed to address, in your opinion, during her first 2 terms? You have 60 seconds to respond.
I'm not really sure what she has addressed for our district, to be honest. And while she may be leading in her polls, there are almost an equally amount of undecided voters in that race. So I think that there's still a lot of folks out there that are not too sure about Nancy Mace within the Republican primary. But she has failed in many ways to address issues related to infrastructure here in this district. Nancy Mace did not vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but when millions of dollars came into our district, who showed up to take credit? It was Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace also votes against women at every single turn. She voted against the Violence Against Women Act. She voted against the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would have helped close the gap within the pay disparity amongst genders in this country, where women make about 84 cents on the dollar to men. So there are a lot of ways in which she has fell short, and I think that that's very evident by the fact that you have so many bipartisan voters that are willing to vote Democrat even if they're not Democrats.
Mr. Moore, the same question to you. What are the three biggest issues U.S. Representative Nancy Mace has failed to address, in your opinion, during her first 2 terms in office? You have 1 minute.
Well, look, I think the issue of women's reproductive freedom is a serious one. She plays so many games with that. A year ago, I sort of with humor asked the question, who is the real Nancy Mace? Is it the one who, chides her party, who critiques her party on this issue, or is it the one who voted for a 6-week abortion ban? People don't know. So I think women's reproductive freedom is one issue. I think, look, the environment, again, is going to requires, frankly, lots of attention and energy, and it's her job to marshal support in Washington to get money down here to support that. I think that's an issue. And then I would say jobs. As we mentioned earlier in the debate, people are suffering. People are still trying to get their legs underneath them post-COVID with housing costs and with healthcare costs and with childcare costs. I mean, people are struggling, and they need their representative to be working for them.
So, Mr. Moore, I have a follow-up for you. In 60 seconds, describe what you would do differently.
I would do everything differently. I mean, on women's reproductive freedom, I would vote to codify Roe. In terms of jobs and the economy, I would do a whole host of things to try to create a more inclusive economy where more people have a better opportunity to take advantage of their skills and hard work. On the environment, I would encourage our president to make the kind of bold investments in the economy like we did with the Inflation Reduction Act. I would also encourage local jurisdictions to do the kinds of things that they need to do to support themselves. On education, I've not heard much of anything from people on the right. 90% of our children go to public schools. We've got to deliver consistently high-performing education to our kids. We fail them otherwise. So there's a whole host of issues that I would strongly advocate. And I think even broader, the issue of just having a representative who actually wants to represent the 1st Congressional District, is not thinking about other things, but wants to have the back of folks here. I think that's an important issue.
Thanks for your response. Mr. Deford, what would you do differently? You have 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you for the question. The first thing I would do is show up. I've been to a lot of communities here in the 1st Congressional District where I asked them, when was the last time Nancy Mace came out and talked to you? Crickets. We need representatives that are going to show up and actually tackle the issues of our time. We have to get serious about the impacts of climate change, both with implementing short-term protective measures such as flood mitigation infrastructure, beach renourishment projects that will protect our environment, but also making sure that we're addressing other issues like housing, for example. I've not seen Nancy Mace introduce any bill to alleviate the housing crisis in this district. And then lastly, I'll say we have a fairly significant problem with gun violence in this state and in the 1st Congressional District. And Nancy Mace has voted against any sensible gun reform legislation that would keep our communities safer. So we need a voice that is going to speak on behalf of all people here in the Low Country and who's actually going to show up.
Thank you for your responses. Ben.
Thank you. We are turning now to the topic of gun violence. So in March, South Carolina passed a permitless carry law allowing anyone 18 years and older who can legally own a gun to carry the weapon openly and without a permit or training. So, Mr. Deford, you are on record saying you 100% oppose this law, arguing that it is reckless and presents a threat to everyone. Do you believe there is a way to balance the need for public safety with the constitutionally protected right to bear arms? You have 60 seconds.
Look, yes, you can respect the Second Amendment and you can allow citizens to have guns. I'm a gun owner myself, but you can also enact sensible gun reform legislation. I was a federal law enforcement officer in the Coast Guard. I've been up close and personal when it comes to gun violence, and I can tell you right now that permitless carry, or constitutional carry as they refer to it, that is not keeping our community safer. It's not keeping our law enforcement and first responders safer. And frankly, even if somebody who is carrying a gun for protection and they're not out to do us harm, if they don't have any training because they've gotten rid of the training requirement, they're more of a threat than they are going to be to do any good. So I do believe we have to get serious about enacting universal background checks, getting the Charleston loophole off the books. And there's even a federal law that prohibits the federal government from having a central digital gun registry, which really delays law enforcement's ability to solve crimes. So we have a lot of work to do in this area as a nation.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, South Carolina ranks 11th in gun death rates, according to the most recent data from the Centers for Disease Control. You have said that curbing gun violence will require common sense solutions. So what are the specific solutions you think should be implemented? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, first, look, I engage with this on a personal level. I've got 4 sons. I've got a beautiful 10-month-old granddaughter. It breaks my heart every time I have to repeat that the #1 cause of death in this country among American children is gun violence. That's a value judgment that we are making as a nation. We are saying that it's not just adhering to the Second Amendment, but it's to the NRA's extreme and perhaps perverted interpretation of the Second Amendment, rather than doing the common sense kinds of things. We've talked about closing all the loopholes. I think 90% of Americans agree that background checks, thorough background checks, are a part of the mix, a part of the solution. I think red flag laws, giving police the power, the tools to protect people from themselves and from others in the community, is appropriate. So I think there are a number of things. And by the way, the vast majority of Americans agree with these things. We just have to have folks in Washington who have the resolve to support these.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Thank you. Candidates, our next topic is education. School districts across SC-01 are grappling with overcrowding, aging infrastructure, and teacher shortages as they try to keep up with increasing demand and a steady influx of students. South Carolina also consistently falls near the bottom in education, with current U.S. News and World Report rankings putting our state at 42nd. Mr. Moore, what can be done at the federal level to help meet the challenge school districts are facing while raising the bar in educational excellence? Well, you have 1 minute.
Look, quickly, I would just say, again, I engage with this very personally. I've seen the benefit, what education can do. My wife, Carla, is a special education teacher in Berkeley County. Both my parents were teachers. 3 of my 4 grandparents were teachers. And of course, my great-great-grandfather wrote the legislation to create the public school system here in South Carolina. So I believe deeply in this. Again, 90% of our kids go to public schools. First, we've got to fund our public schools appropriately. We've got to, quit with these schemes of skimming dollars off to charter schools, or we need to fund our schools. Second, we need to pay our teachers. I see my wife and I see the FedEx packages coming, frequently from her, with her personally going out and buying supplies and things. What other business do we have to do that? Third, I would say, we need to try to shield our classrooms from a lot of the extreme political influence of groups that are trying to influence the curriculum or to ban books or the like.
Thanks for your answer. Mr. Deford, the same question to you. What can be done at the federal level to help meet the challenge school districts are facing while also raising the bar in educational excellence? You have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you for the question. So I believe that in America and here in South Carolina, we need an education system that is second to none. I think it's not only a moral imperative, not just an economic imperative, but it's also a national security imperative. If we are not going to be educating the next generation, then we are going to fall behind as a country, and we will no longer be the leader of the free world. And I don't think anyone would like who the runner-up would be for that position. I think that we have to get serious about investing in our infrastructure in schools. As you mentioned, we have many buildings, schools that are falling apart. They need care and investment as well. We also need to take care of our teachers, support teachers' pay. I mean, Teachers should not have to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And we certainly shouldn't be relying on them to pay for their own school supplies, for example, for their classrooms. That should be provided by the school district. So I think that there's a lot that we can do in South Carolina and in our country when it comes to public education.
Thank you for your response. We will continue on the same topic of education. College tuition has skyrocketed 175% over the past 20 years. Mr. Deford, what will you do to stem the cost of higher education? You have 1 minute to respond.
Well, I think that we need to do all we can to reduce the cost of tuition in higher education. And we have to remember when it comes to student loans, for example, and let's go back to basic finance. A lot of folks that took these student loans out, they took high interest loans out and they've already paid the principal down, and now banks are just making a lot of money on the interest. That is just crippling those people that have massive student loan debt, and that is not good for the economy, because then they are not as able to contribute to our economy. So I do believe that we have to look at improving access to higher education. I think that looking at ways to make, especially vocational training and junior college more accessible and affordable, but also in higher education, and I would say that I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deford. Thanks for your response. Mr. Moore, the same question to you. What will you do to stem the cost of higher education in the future? You have 1 minute to respond.
Well, first, I think we need to understand the root of the problem. And I think, college and universities conspired with financial institutions and the government in their creating guaranteed financial instruments that allowed colleges and universities to just raise, tuition prices, just indiscriminately almost. And so I think we need to wrest that problem. We need to, get in the middle of that, and we need to, work hard to keep those prices down. But I think public colleges and institutions is a part of the solution as well. I believe that we should have public universities that allow, students to come and to get an education. That should be a meaningful part. So I think, again, getting in the way of this college, university, and financial institution kind of cabal, and then helping to support public institutions, I think is the way to go.
And I have a follow-up for you as well, Mr. Moore, on the issue of education. Do you support further forgiveness of student loan debt? And if so, how would you pay for it? You have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I absolutely support that. Look, depending on how you account for it, sometimes up to 90% of the total revenue that comes into the U.S. Treasury coffers comes from you and me, comes from American citizens as opposed to from corporations. And if we are okay with giving billions and billions of dollars to corporate America, we give, for example, a minimum of $20 billion a year to the oil and gas industry, I think it's appropriate on occasion to find those important things that people should get a return on their investment. I think this is one of those.
Thanks for your response. Mr. Deford, the same question to you. Do you support further forgiveness of student loan debt? And if you do, how would you pay for it? You have 30 seconds to respond.
I do. As I mentioned earlier, I think you have to look at who is in need the most of student loan forgiveness. Especially people that are in occupations that perhaps don't pay as much. They are the ones who need that. Those are your public servants. Those are your teachers, your healthcare workers. Those are the people who would benefit greatly from this. And as I said earlier, if they are able to contribute to the economy more, because they're not crippled with student loan debt, then that just increases revenue for the United States.
I appreciate your responses, Ben.
All right, thank you. We want to turn now to what can be a topic of frustration for people up and down the 1st Congressional District. It's traffic. So in the Charleston area, officials have been looking at ways to expand some of the major thoroughfares like Interstate 26 and 526 to alleviate congestion. Officials also say a new bridge needed on Hilton Head Island is needed to address structural deficiencies and mitigate some traffic concerns there. So Mr. Deford, what level of responsibility do federal officials play in securing the funding needed for these projects, and how would you do it? You have 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question. I'm well familiar with the 278 bridge that's at the end of its useful life down there on Hilton Head, where I served as the general counsel for the town there, and I've worked on that project. I think that the role of a congressional representative in instances like that is to make sure that we are bringing the federal resources to bear for whatever project is going to be implemented. You know, determining how they're going to build the bridge, how many bridges, those are local issues, and that is best reserved for your local government in coordination with your county government to solve. However, I believe it's the role of the congressional representative to also listen to community members, make sure that that there is consensus and buy-in, but also making sure ultimately that they're getting the necessary funds that are needed for those projects.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, same question to you. The level of responsibility, what level do federal officials play in securing the funding needed for these projects, and how would you do it? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, look, I think it's responsibility of a representative to bring home the bacon, to represent the district and to secure funding to support the growth and development of the region. So I think it's wholly appropriate that a representative partner with local governments around these projects. Look, there are going to be a lot of these needs, particularly as climate change continues to be an important issue, as we need to make critical investments, whether it's seawalls or bridges and roads, as you suggest. I also think we've got to just be a lot smarter and more thoughtful about the development projects that we undertake. We've got to keep in mind a lot of just the bigger picture about these things.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Candidates, we are nearing the end of the debate, and we want to get to as many questions as possible. You will have 1 minute to respond to this next question. Mr. Moore, we start with you. Have you voted in every presidential election since you registered to vote?
I believe so. I mean, I've been on the planet for a couple of years, so there may have been some years in college, perhaps, but I believe I have.
Thank you for your...
Certainly in the last 25, 30 years.
Mr. Deford, the same question to you. Have you voted in every presidential election since you registered to vote? And you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. There have been a couple elections when I was serving in the U.S. Coast Guard where I unfortunately did not vote, simply because my schedule did not warrant for that, and things changed, and I was not able to secure access to the ballot through other means. I will say that I have voted in the last half decade, and I think it's incredibly important that people vote. They're not proud of the times I haven't voted, but things have come up, and I was serving my country.
Thank you very much for your response. Candidates, you have 30 seconds to respond to this next question. Mr. Deford, if you are elected, would you commit yourself to a term limit? I apologize. Pardon me. You have 60 seconds to respond.
Yeah, so I do think that term limits are something that we need to look at very seriously. I tend to support term limits, not just for the Supreme Court, although I do support strongly, actually, for the Supreme Court. But I think for Congress, I think that there is a balance between facilitating new energy, new ideas, fresh perspectives with experience. And so I don't think that the term limits need to be incredibly short, because I think that, again, you do have to balance that. But I do think that term limits do prevent the entrenchment of power. We have term limits for the presidency, and we saw the necessity for that. And so I do think that term limits would ultimately benefit our country. And sure, there are exceptions where we have long-serving congressional representatives who have done some amazing things. But I think at the end of the day, we could really benefit from term limits by having a continuous, entry of new public servants entering Washington.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, this same question for you. If you are elected, would you commit yourself to a term limit? And you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, look, in general, I think I am term limited by the voters of the first congressional district. I think in Congress, in particular, where there are elections essentially every other year, I think the term limits really don't apply. Look, I look at someone like Congressman Clyburn, who I have enormous respect for. He's one of the longest standing representatives in Washington. He's also one of the most effective. The fact that South Carolina is the first primary in the Democratic presidential process is because, of the work and the effectiveness that he has. So I think, look, everything that we do as a representative, we are subject to the approval, the approval of the voters of the district. And so I think in Congress that term limits really don't make sense.
Mr. Ward, we're going to stay with you for this next question. We want to know, what letter grade would you give President Biden and why? You have 60 seconds. A letter grade for the president.
Yeah, I'm on record as giving him a B+. I think he's done a really, really wonderful job. He got into an economy, or got into office when the economy was pretty much in free fall. Now jobs are up. He's created a record number of jobs. Unemployment is down. The stock market is sky high. Inflation is down. So I think he deserves credit. He's operating under an extremely difficult political environment where every word he utters and every step he takes is critiqued and by the far right. But I think he's done a wonderful job. I think if anything, the B+ is a function of the fact that Afghanistan was tough. I'm glad that we are out of Afghanistan, but perhaps we could have managed that a little more elegantly. And then I would also say I think our vice president is a really wonderful asset to the country, and I think perhaps she might have been able to be deployed in a little bit more effective way.
Thank you. Mr. Deford, a letter grade for President Biden and why? You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. I'm on record with giving President Biden an A. And I don't give him an A+ because there's always room for improvement. But let me qualify why I'm giving President Biden an A. He came into office at the height of a global pandemic. He saw us through the end of that pandemic and helped the economy grow. He enacted monumental legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS, and the bipartisan infrastructure bill that are going to pay dividends for a long time in this country, as opposed to certain other bills that his predecessor passed, like the Trump-era tax cuts, which we are going to be paying for that for a long time, which only added more money to the deficit. So I think that President Biden has done a phenomenal job. And on foreign policy, look, we have very serious conflicts going on overseas, and the United States is supporting its allies, and we have not committed U.S. troops to combat. And as a veteran, I appreciate that more than anything.
Thank you. Before we get to our closing statements, we spent the last hour talking a lot about things that we would change, or you would change about the Lowcountry, but what is one thing that we're wondering you wouldn't change? Just 10 seconds for these, and Mr. Moore will begin with you. What wouldn't you change?
I love the food. Give me some Frogmore stew and some Gullah Geechee dishes, and I'm there every time.
It's got to be our waterways. When I was in the Coast Guard patrolling our waterways, that was my favorite part of the job, was just being out there on the water, and we have some really, truly breathtaking sites here in the Lowcountry.
Candidates, thank both of you. Well, we've reached the end, and we are now moving to closing statements. Neither candidate has held elected office. You now have 1 minute to tell voters what qualifies you for this role and why they should vote for you.
So, Mr. Deford, you will be allowed to go first since Mr. Moore received the first question tonight, so when you're ready.
Thank you very much. First, let me just say thank you to Channel 2 for hosting this event. And to those of you at home tuning in, thank you so much for paying attention and for staying engaged in this election. I will say this, that this is a very serious election. We have very pressing challenges of our times to meet. And we need somebody that has substance, integrity, and who can gain the bipartisan support that is needed to defeat either Nancy Mace or Catherine Templeton in November. And I'm proud that we've built that coalition. And so I am running to protect women's reproductive rights. I am running to reform our gun laws in this country to make sure that we're enacting sensible gun reform legislation that are going to keep our community safe without taking guns out of law-abiding citizens' hands, and making sure that we are investing in our infrastructure, because we need that so desperately here in the Low Country. So if those things sound good to you, please, I would be honored to have your vote on June 11th, and you can learn more about our campaign at defordforcongress.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, 60 seconds for you.
Thank you. And again, thanks to all of you for doing this wonderful public service. Look, you all may have heard that Nancy Mace, through leaked documents, calls herself National Nancy. You may have also heard that she has quotas that her staff have to get her on national news a certain minimum of times. We've all seen the various stunts that she has pulled off to get herself on TV. It's pretty clear that not only does she not have the 1st Congressional District squarely in her sights and that she's working for, but she's also just looking at either another political role or perhaps a gig on Fox News. That's what she's focused on. I am running to represent people who are, many of whom may be descended from people who my ancestors represented. I am running for the same seat my great-great-grandfather served in, and I am running to make sure that someone wakes up in the morning thinking about the Low Country, goes to bed thinking about the Low Country, and has your back. MichaelBMoore.com.
Thank you both.
Thank you, candidates. Well, before we leave tonight, a reminder to you watching and listening. South Carolina's 1st Congressional District primary race is on Tuesday, June 11th. Early voting ends tomorrow.
We want to thank the Democratic candidates, Mac Deford and Michael B. Moore, for joining us tonight. We will be breaking down tonight's debate on CountOn2.com and WSAV.com during our post-debate show with Riley Benson.
And of course, again, we want to say thank you for watching News 2's 1st Congressional District Democratic debate. We certainly enjoyed bringing it to you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.